Genesis chapter 35. It has been a minute since we've been back in Genesis, um, but I just keep on going. I promise I'm gonna finish this book at some point. Uh, we are in lesson 36, but chapter 35. So, if you will try with me to remember back to the last time we talked about Genesis, it was chapter 34, and chapter 34 is a very dark time for Jacob's family. It's whenever Dinah is raped and all of those kinds of things happen. Very dark time. So, um, and then this is pretty much right after that where God speaks to him, to Jacob, and calls him to come back to the promised land and to specifically come back to Bethel. Bethel's the place where he promised the Lord, if you'll take care of me and you'll bring me back, then I'll serve you, right? So that's been a long time ago in the life of Jacob, because he had had to work for his two wives for 14 years, and then he spent some more time there while his children were being born and all of that. So it's been a while. So beginning with verse 1, Genesis chapter 35, let's read that. It says, Then God said to Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau, your brother. I think the question there is asking, what did God tell him to do? As we had talked about before, as I was introducing this, Shechem is the place where the incident happened with Dinah. And really, if Jacob had obeyed the Lord, as you'll see, if you look back to Genesis chapter 31, verse 13, God didn't tell him to go to Shechem in the first place. He didn't tell his brother he was going to go to Shechem. He said he's going to go somewhere else. So disobedience will lead to lots of bad problems for you and your family, is a lesson that we can learn from that. So now he's at last going to go to where God's called him to go. And Shechem represents the world. So if you want to be obedient to the Lord, you got to leave the world's system, the world's principles, and return to where God's called you to. Genesis 34. Now, this you'll find this interesting. Does not mention God one time. That's interesting, isn't it? Genesis 35, when he's obedient and goes to where he's supposed to go, mentions God over and over and over again, more than 10 times that it mentions God. And then plus it mentions names that has God's name in it, like Bethel. I mean, those L is a prefix for God, and Israel is as well. So really, Jacob turns and brings his family back to the promised land, back to within God's will. And when we stay within God's will, I think there's an underlying theme here that God will be with us. You believe that, right? When we stay in his will. And he tells Jacob to make an altar and to resume his life of worship. Prior to that, he had kind of left that. And he's supposed to return to the Lord and choose God's path for his life. So when we look back to Jacob, we see that Bethel is the first meeting place that Jacob had with God. Probably would have seemed like a very high point in his life. It's where God shows him heaven, essentially, and where Jacob comes to realization that this is a place where God is, right? So we see that, and now he's returned, maybe if we can allude to Revelation, to his first love and back to God. So That's a good thing. Let's read verses 2 through 4. And so he had been away from God. He had served to get his wives, his children, all of that. Was supposed to come back to Bethel or the Promised Land, didn't. And when they were away from God, how many knows when you're away from God, you'll pick up some things that you shouldn't be carrying around in your life, right? So what we're going to see is that there's going to be a cleansing of Jacob's family as we read this. It says, "And Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, 'Put away the foreign gods that are among you. Purify yourselves and change your garments.'" Those are all things that speak of, coming back to the Lord and purifying yourself. "Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar there to God, who answered me in the day of my distress and has been with me." Isn't that good? The Lord answered him in the day of distress, and he's been with him in the way in which I have gone. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods which were in their hands, and the earrings which were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree, which was by Shechem. So as they're leaving and returning to where they're supposed to go, there's some things that they do. They start to get rid of their foreign gods. We're talking about idols here. Does anybody remember who picked up their father's idols when they were leaving? Rachel, exactly. So Jacob is showing some tremendous leadership here and telling his family, you can't bring that in. You've got to set those aside. And in effect, he's leading his family as the head of the household and as the priest of the house. He's doing that. And then he tells them to change their garments. It was like a symbolic, ritualistic thing to change your clothes whenever there was a change in your mindset. So we see that. It's like putting on new clothes. I mean, like to put on new clothes, right? Ones that you haven't worn before, and you put them on, it just makes you feel better. So this is like a spiritual kind of reset in their life. And putting them in the right frame of mind to come back to the Lord. And then it mentions earrings here. And the only thing that maybe possibly the reason why they got rid of the rings could be that possibly somehow they're connected with pagan worship. It doesn't say, obviously we've got women in here with earrings and stuff on. It doesn't say specifically that the earrings were the problem, but obviously he had them take them off. They may have been associated with some kind of ritualistic pagan worship or something along those lines. So they got rid of them. It can be. It could have been that. But we also see when they left Egypt that they took that, right? So I think maybe the moral of the story here is you can have lots of things, but do they have you? Possibly. So if they're being used in the wrong manner, it could be bad, even if in general they're not bad, right? It could have been somehow connected to the occult or pagan rituals type things. So, all right, let's read verses 5 through 7. So let's watch the trail. Jacob hears from God, begins to move towards Bethel. They get rid of their idols. They get rid of, they change their clothes. They are preparing themselves to come back to the Lord. And now we're going to see that God will protect them because they're living right. I mean, no, it believes that God protects us when we're living right. That doesn't mean that we never experience problems, because the book of Job will tell us that we can. But that is a general principle, is that when we try to live right, that the Lord is there to protect us and to keep us. So let's read it. "And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were all around them. So they began to travel, um, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. So they didn't come after them, even though they're traveling. And this is a big group of people, so they could have been intimidating. Israel and his family could have been intimidating to the people there, but nobody's pursuing them. So Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, he and all the people who were with him, and he built an altar there and called the place El Bethel, because there God appeared to him when he fled from the face of his brother. So we're looking at God protecting Jacob and his family. Honestly, it would have been fair of God to let them fend for themselves, because there was lots of sin and things that had happened, but God's grace covers them and keeps them from being made vulnerable to the people of that area. They need protection. Why would Jacob and his family need protection? Any ideas? It kind of goes back to where they came from and what happened there. So they had been in Shechem. Do you remember the story? Dinah gets taken, raped, but what do the Levi and was it Levi? Simeon and Levi, they do something very evil to the Lord. And they go in, tell the men to circumcise themselves. They trick them, and then they go in and kill the whole city and take the women and the possessions for themselves. So they've left a bad, exactly what Jacob was worried about. They left a bad taste in the mouth of those who were from that area. So that's why they needed to be protected. And now Jacob is going to build an altar there. I would say rebuild, because he had one there before. And now he's going to trust in the Lord and fear the Lord instead of being disobedient, which is a change of character for him. He up to this point, at times and I think we said this a couple of times ago when I taught, there were times when Jacob was Jacob, and there are times when he was Israel, right? I mean, knows that Jacob's name has been changed at this point, but he doesn't always act like Israel. Israel means Prince of God. So he's not always acting like that, right? Sometimes he's acting in disobedience. At other times we see he's coming back to the Lord. He's doing all these things the right way. So it's very interesting as we track his life. But who would say that sometimes we don't act out of character? You know, we've also been given a new name, the Bible says. So we want to act in the character of the name that the Lord has given to us. So, yeah, you got Simon and you got Peter and all of those. We talked about that last week, right? Now, verse 8. Now, Deborah, Rebekah's nurse. So remember, you have Rebekah and you have Leah. I want to say ugly all the time. Can't help myself. You have Rebekah and Leah, and they both have nursemaids. They both have servants, and Jacob has children by them. So this is specifically talking about Rebekah's nurse. Deborah died, and she was buried below Bethel under the terebinth tree. So the name of it was called Alon Bekath. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Just say it fast, and everybody believe you know how to say it. So Rebekah is you have Isaac and Rebekah, but this is Rebekah's nurse. I'm sorry, I misstated that. Rebekah's nurse that died. So later on, we'll get to somebody else that's dying. That is where I was talking about. So she came. Seemingly, she came with Rebekah as a companion when They came from Haran to marry Isaac. So you're correct on that. Um, all right. And they bury her at Alon Beketh, which means oak of weeping. So I find very interesting. They do a lot of burying beside trees and then burying idols and all kinds of things. So not sure what the significance of that is. Let's read verses 9 through 15. And now we see that God has protected Jacob, and now he's going to speak to him. That's pretty powerful. God's going to begin to speak to him again. Then God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padanaram and blessed him, and God said to him, "Your name is Jacob." So he's saying, your name is the old name. Your name shall not be called Jacob anymore, but Israel. This is not the first time God's told him that. Why is God saying it again? It's not one of the questions on the thing. Yeah. Right. So here, Jacob is now returning, and God is reminding him that, by the way, you're supposed to be living different because you got a different name, right? So it's a reminder. It's not the first time that God's told him this. So he called his name Israel. Also, God said to him, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall proceed from you, and kings shall come from your body." Now watch this. So not only does he change his name, but now he's going to rehearse the promise that was given to Abraham and Isaac. "The land which I gave Abraham and Isaac I give to you, and to your descendants after you I give this land." Then God went up from him in the place where he talked with him. So Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, a pillar of stone. And he poured a drink offering on it, and he poured oil on it. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spoke with him Bethel. So this is Bethel is like a place of consecration for Jacob. He's renewing his commitment to the Lord. He's setting up an altar. He's doing all these kinds of things. And in turn, God is reminding him of his new name, new character, and reminding him of the promise that had been passed down to him. So, by the way, and this is just something Spurgeon said that I thought was interesting. The next thing that came of it, which is talking about him having a new name, was a confirmation to Jacob of his title of prince. Jacob means, Israel means prince of God, which conferred a dignity on the whole family. So it's not just Jacob who is God's chosen, but it's his whole family, right? And there's a dignity that's placed upon him, which speaks of our the impact that we have on our families, right? So very interesting to see that. All right. And then towards the end of it, it says, "Then God went up from him in the place where he talked with him." So apparently, Jacob saw a bodily form of God. That, by the way, the theological term for that is theophany. That means an appearing of Christ before he's actually come as a babe, right? So there is a appearance of God as some kind of bodily form, and it leaves after this conversation between Jacob and God. All right. Let's read verses 16 and 17. And this is going to talk about his last son being born. I mean, know what the last son's name was? Benjamin. Benjamin, that's the name of my second son, Benjamin. It says, "Then they journeyed from Bethel, and when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath," by the way, that is a name, it's an older name for Bethlehem. So they're coming to the holy city. Rachel labored in childbirth, and she had hard labor. Now it came to pass when she was in hard labor that the midwife said to her, "Do not fear, you will have this son also." So remember the struggle that Rachel had of having children. She had one, and then it seemed like she just stopped having children. That's why she got her nursemaid involved in having children for Jacob, all those kinds of things. This is going to be her second son. So it's very important. She wanted to make sure this child lives, right? And it's how she can give something to Jacob. At this point, they're all older. There's probably not quite as much contention and competitiveness, but it's still important to her. And this son will be born in the promised land, which is a great thing, right? So let's read the next verse. And so it was, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. In the Old Testament, names have significant meanings, right? I honestly think as Christians we should have an understanding the importance of names when we name our children. If we didn't, it's not like the Lord's going to beat us down for not doing so, but I think it is an important thing to have, a good name for our children. We tried to make sure we had some kind of name that was had significant meaning, or possibly connection with family, or all those kinds of things, which were appropriate. But she called his name Ben-Oni, being the last child, and she probably at this point knew she was going to pass. Ben-Oni means son of my sorrow, right? Sorrow, S-O-R-R-O-W. It wasn't probably just that she was going to pass that she called him son of sorrow. It's probably a look back to the competition between her and her sister Leah, and how futile that really was. That this competition, this back and forth, and to know that God's really in charge, right? God's sovereign. So she calls him son of my sorrow, of my pain. Yeah, yeah. But his father called him Benjamin. So Jacob renames him, and I think, can you imagine having to walk around with the name son of pain or son of sorrow, right? That would have been something for that child to deal with, right? Plus, it doesn't really, it's not a very happy name, right? So we look at that. How many have ever heard of the prayer of Jabez? Right, I've preached on it. It's been a while ago. And Jabez means something very similar to this. It means like son of pain or something. It's right along with this. And he had been walking around, and people say, "Well, you're just a big pain," right? So Jacob renames him and calls him the son of my right hand, right? Benjamin, son of my right hand. What is significant about the right hand? Anybody want to take a stab at that? You probably know. Jesus is at the right hand, so that's a place of what? Honor, authority. Carol, what'd you say? There is something actually that one of the commentaries that I read said, most people are right-handed, so it's a dominant type thing. It's a place of authority, all of that. So it's a good thing. It's a special place that God had for this child and it's a good name. Benjamin. The right side is associated with greater strength and honor. Do we have anybody in here left-handed? Virginia is. Anybody else? If you have to do something with your right hand, how difficult is it? Very. Can I ask you, if you have to do something with your left hand, how difficult is it? Extremely, right? Extremely difficult. So it's the place of a special place, a place of strength and honor. So we see that. The son, so Jacob is saying, you're a son of my strength and a son of my honor. And as Kay said, Colossians 3:1 says that Christ is sitting at the right hand of God. What does he do there, by the way? He does judge, he reigns, but he also makes intercession for us, right? So that means that when we need help, he's right there at God's right hand in a place of honor and authority and strength to be able to go on our behalf, right? Yes, and sitting, so it is done. All right, let's read verses 19 and 20. I probably will finish a little bit early on this, but I say that every time, and then we take more time. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem, and Jacob set a pillar on her grave, which is the pillar of Rachel's grave to this day. A look back to Genesis 31, Rachel had pleaded with Jacob. I don't know if you remember this or not. Give me children or else I will die. And as it happens, both of those come true. So she had a child, and she also died as a result of that. Let's read verses 21 and part of 22 here. Then Israel journeyed and pitched his tent beyond the tower of Eder. And it happened when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard about it. I think when I began talking about Jacob's family, I said we're going to talk about dysfunction, right? This is another point of dysfunction. So the oldest son goes and lies with one of Jacob's, does it say, concubines, and Israel heard about it. So this is a serious offense and a mark on the family, all of those kinds of things. And so now, look, we have Levi and Simeon, who have both sinned because they went and killed the whole city because of Dinah. Now you have Reuben, who has laid with his father's concubine. So all of them, because of sin, have disqualified themselves for the blessing of Abraham. So now it's going to fall on the fourth son, which will be Judah. Understand this, from whom the Messiah will come. Right? I find that extremely interesting. Because of sin, they disqualify themselves. Remember, they're all God's children. They're all Jacob's children, but yet the blessing has to pass to one person, and it's usually the oldest. But the top three knock themselves out of that blessing, and now it is Judah, the fourth born, who will receive that blessing, and the Messiah will come from his lineage. All right, let's read the second half of verse 22 through 26. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. Remember, he had 12 sons, one daughter, right? The sons of Leah were Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel were Joseph, which is interesting that Jacob always preferred the sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin, right? The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, were Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, were Gad and Asher. Those were the sons of Jacob that were born to him. So, very large family, chosen by God. The blessing, the promise of God, a land and a posterity that would continue, all of those kinds of things that we see that's promised to Abraham will pass through this family, specifically through Judah. And then the last verse, I think that's right. Nope, there's two more after that. Jacob visits his father Isaac one last time. I find this very interesting. When Jacob left, he left because he thought his father was going to die, and his father was the only one that could protect him from his brother Esau, right? He also left because he had tricked his father Esau, and I'm sure he's on the bad side of Esau, right? So he leaves, but this is 20 years later. How many knows that God controls our calendar, right? It can look like somebody's going to pass away. They might live 20 more years. You just don't know. It's God's calendar, and he keeps it for each one of us. Then Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre, or Kirjath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had dwelt. So it had been 20 years since he had seen his father. And really, it's a blessing that he gets to see him. There's nothing dramatic that happens between Isaac and Jacob at this meeting. Doesn't talk about any further words of blessing or curses or anything in particular that happens. But Jacob and Esau, we'll find out. I'm going to read that verses 28 and 29, end up burying their father together. And I find that so interesting and so good that they are able to do that. Now, the days of Isaac were 180 years. Wow. I don't think I want to live that long. But anyway, 180 years. So Isaac breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people, being old and full of days. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. That obviously is some kind of reconciliation between these two brothers, right? They're at least able to set aside any differences, any hurts, any misunderstandings so that they can bury their father. And they have been brought back together by God's hand, and now they're going to be able to work together in unity side by side at their father's death. So it seems that God has a way of restoring things. Amen? All right. I said I might be early, and I might. Well, let's go through the questions, and then we'll see if there's the questions I wrote, and then we'll see if there's any other questions or comments about this particular chapter. So question 1, according to verse 1, what did God instruct Jacob to do? Get up, go to Bethel, make an altar to God, right? According to verse 2, question 2, what did Jacob tell his household to do? Put away foreign gods. What else? Purify yourselves, change your garments, right? All of those things. And what? Yeah. All right. Question 3, according to verse 3, what was Jacob's testimony about God? Verse 3 specifically says, yes, that God answered me in my distress and has been with me. So that's a good testimony, isn't it? We did testimonies Sunday had some specific ones, and I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed that. That was tremendous. That was powerful, in my opinion. Um, so that's his testimony that God has answered me in my distress and has been with me. Question number 4: why was Jacob and his family safe on their journey, according to verse 5? The terror of God was on all the cities around them. So, very good. All right. Where was Deborah buried, and what does it mean? Alan Becketh, and it means oak of weeping. Correct. Uh, oak of weeping, as in crying. Yes. Question 6: what did God tell Jacob about his name, according to verse 10? Yeah. It is your name, but you're not going to be called that anymore, right? But you shall be what? Israel. Question 7: what did God tell Jacob about the land, according to verse 12? The land I give to you and to not just him, but who? All of his descendants. Right. Fill in the blank on verse, this comes from verse 18. Rachel called her last son Benani, meaning son of what? Sorrow, my sorrow. But Jacob called him Benjamin, meaning son of my right hand. Very good. And then according to verse 29, who buried Isaac? Esau and Jacob. Very good.